let's go ahead. I'm going to pin myself up here and welcome. Is everybody good to start? Anybody have any questions before we begin? Everybody getting good audio and video? Good? Okay. Well, welcome to the April edition of ELPCO Online. Seems like all of America is online these days, and so ELPCO is following through. This is our second online meeting. We're using the Google Meets Hangout platform, or Google Hangouts Meet. I always forget which one it is. You know, if you have any suggestions on the platform or how this works, please do send those in. All of us community councils are experimenting with this new environment and trying to make it work best. I borrowed this from my son's third grade class. They used this platform and it seemed to be pretty good. So that's why we launched it. We've got a nice full agenda for today, starting with just basically welcome. So I wanted to welcome a couple of folks here. Landon Clark, the chair of the Sugar House Community Council. Landon, thanks for being here. We've got Detective David King from Salt Lake City Police. We've got Daryl High, co-chair also of ELPCO. Daryl, did you want to say hello?
Good evening.
Okay. And we have several of our speakers here, including Nick Norris from the Salt Lake City Planning Department. Myron Willson, who's an ELPCO resident, is going to talk to us about the Sweet Streets initiative, which is actually kind of hard to say fast if you try it. Sweet Streets. I won't embarrass myself. And then wrapping things up is Tim Cosgrove from the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office, which has been very busy over the past couple of weeks, sharing information and advice and resources for Salt Lake City residents. So what I might just ask you to do is mute your camera, mute your interface with us, unless you're on the phone there. The way you do that is you just click on the little microphone button. And look, I just muted myself because now you can't hear me. I said I just muted myself, but you mute yourself, and that way we won't hear any incidentals and things like that. I've got a bunch of crazy kids in the next room, and so you might hear them a little bit. I apologize for that, but I'll try to mute myself when I'm not talking. And we'll just cycle through. So starting with Detective King of Salt Lake City Police. Detective King, I'm going to put you up to be pinned here, and just take it away.
All right, are you able to hear me all right? So, hope you guys are all surviving this stuff that's going around, and hoping that we can get back to somewhat of a normal life, especially with them wanting to try to do like soft openings and seeing what we can do. But looking at the ComStat reports, if you're new or you haven't, or you forgot where this is at, if you go on the Salt Lake City Police Department, just to slcpd.com, you can go to Open Data and go down to ComStat, and it has all the districts, and it gives you all of the numbers for what's going on. It looks like in some areas we've improved, others just had a little bit of an issue. It looks like for the most part, there was a little bit of an increase in some robberies and stuff, and I think that was just maybe again just a retail theft that, because they used some kind of force or fear, it might have elevated it to another incident. And then with assault, there's been some recent articles on the news where they talked about Salt Lake was reporting that domestic violence is up. There were some issues with custody issues. I posted on Nextdoor, if you ever get on there. I've talked about it before, but just kind of posting again about different resources if someone is involved in a domestic violence, whether it's physical, emotional, or whatever it is. There is help. Salt Lake Police Department does have a 24-hour advocate. You can either get on Nextdoor and find that, or you can just type in Salt Lake City victim advocates, and you can find the numbers on our website. But as far as the numbers for the last 7 days, it looks like that we haven't, in District 5, we haven't had any family issues, which is really great. I just hope that everyone is able to get along and figure things out. The last 28 days, it looks like we're still a little bit under some of the averages when they compare it to the previous year, which is good. Burglaries, residential burglaries, I think because a lot of people are being home. We haven't had a whole lot of residential burglaries, but one of the things that says burglary all other, I believe that's referring to maybe some non-residents whether it's a shed, detached garage, or something like that. We've had a little bit of an increase, not by much, but it's just something. Just pay attention to what's going on, and just watch out for neighbors, watch out for yourself to see who's kind of going, just kind of in the neighborhood. And if there's anything, you can feel free to give us a call and we can check that out if you feel like there's someone suspicious. I did have an email where someone had seen someone maybe they had a camera, great picture. Someone was just walking around and was looking in the bed of the truck. Nothing was taken, but they were on the property looking in the truck. It's suspicious. It really doesn't match up with what's going on. And they sent it to me, and I was able to send that up to our sergeants for the property crimes. But even just something simple as that, if you were to call in, you can call the 799-3000 and just file like a suspicious person report so we can document what's going on. We can kind of see what's going on because we are a kind of a stat-driven department where we're looking to see where we're getting the reports written. And so when we have information like that, especially with this time in our life with just the great cameras, it's a great shot of the person walking around. Feel free to reach out to us and see what we can do. A lot of times it's probably just going to be an information report on our own, but sometimes that helps us lead to other crimes that we're able to link up. So definitely feel free to give us a call. Vehicle burglaries are down. All other larcenies are down. Vehicle thefts are down. I think when I'm looking at the ComStat report comparing the last 28 days to the last 5-year average, we went from a 5-year average of 22.4 for the last 28 days down to 14. So we've had a little bit of a decrease. I think a lot of that, again, is just everyone being home and just being there. But yeah, I'm hoping that everything's gonna be going good. And with maybe some of these soft openings, there are some guidelines that have been kind of put out. I'm going to put something out on Facebook just kind of talking about masks and different things that, sorry, I had my Facebook pulled up and I was going to read some stuff, but I just ended up closing it out. Anyways, I'll be posting some stuff just talking about just what they've already said as far as wearing some kind of a mask or something that it's been shown to help out. Just keeping that social distance as everything is, maybe looking at starting to do some opening, just do that hand wash and just look out for others. If there's something you can do to help somebody else, just see what you can do to help them out, and just be that good neighbor and create that unity within your neighbor to see what you can do. Does anybody have any questions for me about anything that's going on?
Anybody have questions for Detective King? You can write them in the chat box, or you can just ask them if you're unmuted, but make sure you're unmuted before you start talking. Detective King, I just had a quick question, if you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
I understand, a lot of police departments have been hit hard by the coronavirus in terms of officers testing positive, becoming sick. How is the Salt Lake City Police Department doing on that front?
I don't know of anyone on the department yet that is tested positive. I know that there's been some officers that they were maybe potentially came in contact and were kind of put in like a little quarantine area, but I don't know of anybody that's been tested positive yet. And so far, I think we're doing okay. We're kind of rotating in and out as far as doing a little bit of work from home, coming into the office and doing stuff. And so I think they're trying to take that really safe approach and trying to just help us so that we can all keep doing our job and helping you guys out as the community. So I think we're doing good. Like I said, I haven't heard anything, just a couple maybe some concerns, but it's all just been being proactive and stuff.
Well, sometimes no news is good news, so.
Yeah.
I had one quick follow-up question as well. It's actually more of a comment too, and I guess that is, here, I'll pin myself up here. People are taking a lot of walks these days. It seems to be the one thing that we can do that is safe. And so I've noticed a lot of people coming up and down my street that I normally don't recognize. New faces, new people, new dogs. And so I think it's just important for our residents to know that you're probably going to be seeing a lot of what you might think of as strangers or unusual people coming up and down your street. And that's just the nature of where we are right now. So not necessarily something you want to be concerned about or call things in. But I presume, Detective King, you still want folks to call in, like people rifling through cars, car prowls, graffiti, vandalism, break-ins, things like that. You guys are still responding and taking that type of crime reports even in the current condition we're in?
Yeah, that is a good point that I neglected to say is that, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people out walking around. It's just use your judgment, see what's going on. Just be wary and see what's going on. But if you definitely have an issue that is something that we do want to know, with, of course, with the corona stuff going on, that sometimes we're taking a little bit different of an approach at times. A lot of times where if an officer might have responded in the past, a lot of times they might call to begin with just to see what's going on. If it requires a in-person response, then they'll come out. But they're doing a little bit more of some telephonic calls to get reports and to get that stuff documented. So if there are issues, definitely be giving us a call so we can at least get that documented for you.
Any other questions for Detective King?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just trying to see if there's any other questions. No? Okay.
And then, if anybody does have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me. You can go to the slcp.com and scroll down. There's a spot to find my CIU officer, and my phone number and email are there, and you can get a hold of me that way.
Gotcha. We'll also put that in the chat function on the meeting. This is my son Calvin. Hey, Calvin. Hi. Welcome to the meeting. Well, thank you, Detective King. Thanks for being here and helping us out. And we'll put not only the non-emergency number, but also Detective King's email address. I think it's the CIU 5, if that's correct.
CIU District 5.
CIU District 5.
District 5 at SLC Gov.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, we'll put that up there a little bit later on. All right. Next on the agenda, we have Salt Lake City Council Member Darren Mono. Darren, sometimes it's hard to tell who's on and who's not. Are you here? I don't see him. No one's responding. So why don't we check to see back in a little bit. I might text him just to see if he's having any trouble getting on. But then why don't we actually, if you're ready to go, can we skip ahead to the Salt Lake City Planning 101 presentation?
Absolutely.
I will get you pinned here.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here, so.
You can come in. I'm muted and not focused.
Is somebody else going to be talking?
Yeah.
And if you might be able to step out for a second and connect the VCR.
Give me a second to make sure I'm sharing the right screen.
Nice skis.
Doesn't look like I am.
Who's that?
Nick Miller's planning director. Oh, this is live too. So
I'm just wondering if you might be able to help us.
okay.
Because the VCR isn't connected and we really want to watch Beauty and the Beast. So when you're done, when you're ready, and you have a break.
You know, Nick, I think.
Jason, are you seeing the
Yes,
PowerPoint?
I've just got it pinned up. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't show on my screen, so let me make sure I'm doing it here. So thank you for inviting me to make the presentation. This is a presentation that we do to a number of community councils and have for the past few years. It's basically, we call it a Planning 101. It's mostly about zoning and how to read a zoning ordinance and a zoning map and what we do as a division And so I'm just going to jump in real quick. The Salt Lake City Planning Division, we have a total of 30 employees. Our primary duties are listed on the screen. We're in this, what has been about an 18-month run of unprecedented development. So most of what we're doing right now is processing land use applications. Those are things like conditional uses and plan developments and special exceptions and things that many of the community councils see on a regular basis. But we do a lot of other things, some of which maybe people don't quite realize. But we also are kind of the shepherds of the community master plans. We make all kinds of interpretations on the zoning code and what it means and how it applies to building permits. We do a street and alley closures. And one thing that we do a lot of that is kind of behind the scenes is helping other city departments with their planning needs, whether it's public services, public utilities, transportation, engineering, etc. So we're pretty engaged with a lot of city departments. A couple things that we don't do that we do get a lot of questions about is that we do not do zoning reviews. Those are all done in the building permits office. So they have their zoning technicians that make sure that plans meet zoning codes. When they have questions, we help answer them, but we also don't deal with the actual enforcement. So when there's violations and things like that, we're generally not involved in, again, unless there's a question on what an ordinance means or if they need some kind of help. I mentioned the community master plans, so we are the shepherds of those. The master plans are essentially guides by law and by city ordinance. They're not intended to establish the rules. They simply are advisory documents, and so and they're intended to help guide the future development of the city. Then they're basically driven by level of change. All cities are going through a constant state of change, and that change is either low, moderate, or transformative. I think we've seen in some of our neighborhoods that there's been some pretty transformative change in Granary, Central Line, things like that. Most of the change in the city is moderate, meaning it's what you would expect in those areas. For example, even though we see tall buildings downtown, we expect those buildings downtown, so we don't really consider that transformative. It's meeting expectations of what the zone is intended to do. The master plans are a bunch of written policies mostly. They include a future land use map. These are just some examples of the type of a policy that may be written in a master plan, just so people know. We look at the plans with the text is to us just as important as the maps. The maps are great, but they're also, again, intended to be guides and just visually represent the level of change in neighborhoods. Master plans are used in a number of ways. They help guide land use decisions. So we have some processes that refer back to the master plans. All zoning changes do. There's a couple other things like some plan developments that do as well. They help link growth and infrastructure needs. So as we grow, we know that our infrastructure, both above ground and below ground, can meet the capacity and the needs. They're also used in making some budget decisions at the city council level, and I've listed some of those there. Master plans are implemented in a number of ways. Most people think that it's the city that implements the master plans, but most of the master plans, at least when it comes to land use, are implemented by the private sector. So people opening a business, building new housing, things like that. The city's role really comes down to the infrastructure and zoning to make sure that master plans can be implemented. But they're implemented based on 4 key considerations: the resource it would take to actually implement it, how long it may take, the level of community support to do it at that point in time, and of course, money. The zoning ordinance, in how it differentiates from the master plan, is the zoning ordinance is law. It's a way to help implement the master plans and to regulate the growth and the impacts that the city needs. The zoning code itself lists a number of reasons why we have it. I've summarized some of those there, but it's essentially to help manage change. And that's why some zones basically try to keep things exactly as is or relatively as is, like in the single family zones, and other areas allow for more growth and change. So the zoning divides the city into a number of different districts. I have a zoning map later on in the presentation. You can see how that has changed over time, but each district regulates the uses, building heights, setbacks, where buildings can be placed on a lot, where their entrances are depending on what zone, and a bunch of other things too that a lot of times people don't realize are part of zoning. Everything from signs to, at least right now, the width of your drive aisle in a parking lot is all part of the zoning ordinance. Projects in development are handled in one of two ways. The first is by right. That means that they comply with the requirements of the zone, and the zoning ordinance does not require any sort of approval process other than a building permit or business license. And so these are things often called permitted uses or permitted development. They are things that have an acceptable level of impact. All development, whether you're building a single family house or a 24-story building downtown, has some impact. When things are listed as by right, it's basically saying we know what these impacts are going to be, and we determine that they're going to be acceptable, and that's why they're written into code. Now, the other important thing to remember about zoning is that its very nature is a limitation on property rights. So prior to zoning, really in the United States in the early 20s, most places were a free-for-all. And so people could just build and do whatever they want. That's why we had tenements in New York City and things like that. And it was because of those impacts, primarily health and safety issues, that zoning was created. And so it was meant to limit the property rights in the name of health and safety. So if something's not by right, it generally means a few things. It either has greater impacts, the rules didn't anticipate and couldn't have anticipated the type or level of development, or somebody seeking some kind of an exception to the rule. So we have a number of processes in our code that do these. The first I was going to talk about really quickly is a conditional use. These are uses that may create an impact above and beyond what is normally permitted. And it's a process to check what those impacts are and to see what can be done about them. Conditional uses are really heavily limited by state law, in that if there is an impact, and that impact can be reduced even by a minimum amount, then cities are required to approve those conditional uses. So in Salt Lake City, conditional uses are subject to what we call the early notification requirements. That's where we send out notices to the recognized organization and the neighbors, and they have 45 days to help us identify the impacts. That's kind of the role of the community input with these types of things, is that if there is an identified impact, can it be measured, and can something be done about it in terms of the site or something like adding fences and things like that to help reduce that impact. Most of our conditional uses in Salt Lake City come down to four things: ADUs, bars, cell towers, and then auto-related things like auto repair shops. We do about 50 to 60 conditional uses every year. One of the other major things that communities see are plan developments. These are more of a discretionary review, although in some zoning districts they're required, and so if something meets the standards, they have to be approved as well. But this is where somebody is proposing a modification to a zoning rule in exchange for some public benefit. And the code lists what those public benefits are. Sometimes it's providing housing. There's a bunch of things listed as preserving historic structures or landscapes and other things like that. And so this is where the Planning Commission has some leeway. You see a lot of residential infill. One of the interesting things about the city code is that you see the image on the screen, is that all lots in the city are required to have street frontage. And so because of the nature of our blocks, where we have generally narrow lot frontages, but really deep lots, some of our lots are 300 feet deep, and are zoned for single family, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a 75-foot wide lot that's 300 feet deep that could fit 4 or 5 homes on it. And so they go through this plan development process. that's the number one reason why we get plan development applications. Design review is something that has been expanded a little bit in the city. I think everybody in ELPCO is familiar with some of the projects in the 9th and 9th neighborhood that have gone through this. Generally, this is a process that's triggered by the size of a building. And so that varies based on the nature of the district. So in the 9th and 9th area, it's any building over, I think, minimum footprint of 7,500 square feet, or a total square footage of 15,000 has to go through this process. Buildings in Sugar House over a certain size or over a certain square footage have to go through this. And then downtown, it varies based on where the building is, but anything over basically over 100 feet on the mid-block or 375 feet on the corner goes through these processes. These again are also, actually right now, these are not subject to the early notification process in the code. We are working on a change that the city council is considering right now that would add this to at least some projects in some zoning districts, would add this process to the early notification. This is a two-tier thing, so sometimes if it's a minor modification to a design standard, those things we can do it at the staff level and don't need to go out to community reviews. Those are things like if the code requires a minimum of 40% glass and they got 38, we can approve that following the code. We do a lot of special exceptions. These are really minor in nature to some dimensional requirement usually, or to some accessory use or building. They're not subject to the early notification because their impacts are usually to the next door neighbors. Occasionally they could be impacted properties across the street. You can see some examples of these listed here. Most of these are approved at the staff level. Some of them go to the Planning Commission or the Historic Landmarks Commission, which has pretty broad discretion under the special exception statutes of the city. Historic reviews, we do a ton of historic reviews. It's the biggest thing that we do. About 40% of our workload are things in historic districts. We have some of the largest historic districts in the country, actually. I think the Avenues District is maybe one of the 10 largest historic districts in the U.S. There's 1,400 properties in it. The Historic Landmarks Commission basically reviews anything that is a change to the property. Some of those can be reviewed at staff. Bigger things go to the commission. New construction goes to the commission. Demolitions of contributing to landmark buildings go, other historic buildings go there. We do a lot of re-roofs and things like that at the staff level that don't require a ton of review and are fairly easy. One thing that people get that is really confusing, this is probably the most confusing land use application there is, it's called a variance. These are situations where the nature of the property makes it almost impossible to comply with the zoning regulation. So in Salt Lake City, we see most of these in our foothills where we have really steep slopes. Along some of our stream corridors, sometimes we have stream corridors that split right through a property, and so they can't meet setbacks. And these are really limited. There's 5 requirements in state law that they have to demonstrate they meet all 5 in order to get approved. We only do maybe 2 or 3 of these per year. They're pretty rare. The special exception process eliminates some of those as well. Public engagement. Most community councils are familiar with the letters they get from us, the notices, but the code requires a 45-day comment period. And that starts the day that we send a notice out to the recognized organizations, community councils, business districts, etc. Most of those will share them with their community through listservs and things like that. But this is, when we come to a community council meeting, you'll see an applicant make a presentation and our planning staff is there to help answer questions about the code or the process. This is why. These projects are required by code to go there. And then they help us identify the issues and concerns. Depending on the nature of the application, really determines the purpose of the engagement. So with those land use applications like a conditional use where we're almost required to approve them, it really is about issue identification. When it's a zoning change or a master plan change, street closures, they're open to much more opinion and whether or not people think it's good for their neighborhood or not. One thing about this is that we can't hold public hearings within that 45 days. We can schedule them to occur after, but we can't actually hold it. We are proposing a change to this because we think that there's sometimes where, for example, the Planning Commission may benefit from hearing from the community early, and so that they could hold a public hearing but not make a decision within those 45 days. So it expands our flexibility in how we get engagement, how the decision makers hear that. Public hearings are required for any decision made by the Planning Commission and Landmarks Commission, 12 days notice. This is kind of the late stage of public input for administrative decisions. Most of them that would go on the Planning Commission agenda would have gone through that 45-day notice. The only projects that really don't are those special exceptions, and those are special exceptions that we can't approve at the staff level for some reason, or we're not comfortable. So most of our applications are staff approvals. Last year we had our biggest year ever for applications. We had over 1,200 land use applications in our division. About 170 of those, I think, went to either the Planning Commission or Landmarks Commission. So the majority of things are done at the staff level. And these are really minor types of things, or things that are otherwise authorized the staff to review and approve. Let's move on to the zoning map. This image is the very first zoning map that the city had in 1927. You can see the darker colors for downtown, the Sugarhouse Business District located there, some of our major corridors like Redwood Road and North Temple. One of the things that I find fascinating about this is that there's only 6 districts in the city, which is pretty crazy, I think. But it speaks to kind of the nature of how things were done. And this was adopted in 1927. So it shows you the historical boundaries of the city and how much we've actually grown and changed compared to the zoning map now, where we have, I think, 56 zoning districts. A lot of that is because of the local context has become more important to people, and so we try to craft more neighborhood-specific types of regulations. But one of the things that when we zoom out on the map that this shows that is really starting to become an issue, I think, for the city, is that the midline of the city is roughly I-215. So about 50% of the land is west of that, 50% of the land is east of it. And we have some major things that prevent and limit where we can develop in the city and what type of development. Obviously, City Creek Canyon, our foothills, our parks, everything green on this map are places that we don't want to develop or can't develop, and for good reason. The other major issue is the airport. So you can see the airport with the plane on it right there. Residential land uses are prohibited within some rings that surround the airport that mainly go north and south of the airport. That's obviously to deal with impacts from planes taking off and landing, the noise, the emissions, and everything else. But one of the things that has created is that almost half of our city is industrial. So we have a really hard time creating some of the mixed-use neighborhoods and districts, and it means everything is focused on really the colored, the reds, the purples, and things like that on the map. The yellows are all single-family residential. They occupy about 12% of the land in Salt Lake City, even though we think of them as being the bulk of the city. It's a really small amount. When you read the zoning map, everything is, planners and zoning love acronyms and things like that. And so we have all kinds of things. An R basically means it's residential. When you see something that starts with an R, the single family zones will have a 1 next to it, and then a number like 5,000, which is the minimum lot area per unit that you need. The RMF, because it has various density requirements based on lot size, the 35 is actually the building height. So the R residential, the M multi, the F family, meaning the multifamily, residential multifamily is the highest level of use, most intense use that's allowed. And then you have RMU zones, and you can read those on the screen. Commercial is very, very similar. Every letter means something. We try to keep those consistent across the board. So anything that starts with a D, is a downtown zone. TSA, transit station area. C, for whatever reason, in 1995, instead of C meaning commercial, it means two different things. It means community and in some areas and commercial in others. So it's a weird discrepancy that's fairly unique to Salt Lake and how the zoning districts were named. To the trained eye, we can also tell by looking at the colors of what the zoning districts mean in terms of intensity. This is pretty consistent across zoning ordinances throughout the country. Excuse me. But basically, the lighter the color, the less intense the type of development is. So you'll see single-family zoning in the two columns of colors and names by them are generally the lighter yellows, the smaller commercial or more pink, things like that. Because we have so many, we throw patterns in there as well. We try to use the patterns when there are unique situations. So if you were to look at the commercial districts, they're almost always red in color. The darker the red and the more rich the color is means the more intense it is. So in Salt Lake, the CG zone is the most intense commercial zone we have. It's where the busiest uses are, the biggest buildings are. This is the 300 West corridor. And then you can see all the way down to the CN zone, which is like the 15th and 15th neighborhood. A lot of our corner business districts are CN, and then the RV, which is on some of 900 South and 1100 East. And so just to kind of wrap up, I wanted to give everybody an update on our status under the current situations. Hopefully people can appreciate, we actually started planning for major disruptions in our service as a planning division many years ago. So we started putting all of our staff has the ability to work remotely. We set them up with all the equipment they need to do that as we replace computers and things like that. And so everybody has very simple kind of plug and play systems with everything that they need accessible. So on March 12th, we were basically told that we were going to end up going to start developing the work from home plan. We were the first work group in the city to carry it out, and by the next day, we had half our staff was already working from home. Less than a week later, we had the earthquake, which made our office space unavailable completely. And so we had to scramble a little bit. We canceled some meetings, our planning commission and landmarks, which we were already set up to go remotely, but we didn't know that we could do it from our homes. We were planning on doing them from the city and county building, but since that wasn't occupiable, we had to make some changes. By the end of March, everything was digital and we were ready to go. We were 100% fully operational remotely. The only disruption that people will see is the in-person, face-to-face things in our phones. We do have access to our phones. It's just delayed, so email is the best way to get in touch with us. And that's my presentation.
All right. Thank you very much. Nick, now we can see, let me actually pin you here. Now we can see you working from home, doing all your work remotely like you guys have been able to do. It looks like you're missing the ski season as well, like many of us from your background. I think one of the things that really stuck out for me was that residential makes up 12% of Salt Lake City's land use. I mean, that's unbelievable. But what a strange sort of bias we have when we look at the map and realize how small that is. Can you explain? You also mentioned that about 40% of your work is historical district stuff. What is an historical district evaluation? What would be involved in that type of process?
Yeah, so most of what it means is if somebody is making some change to their property, somebody's replacing their roof, they have to get a certificate of appropriateness. That's a really easy thing for us to issue. We generally can do that in an hour or two. So it doesn't really delay anybody's work. Those are someone's replacing their windows, their front door. The thing that we don't really regulate, we don't regulate oil in the historic district. We only regulate paint if somebody wants to paint brick, because painting brick is really bad for the brick unless they're using the right type of paint, especially to allow the brick to breathe and things like that. There are some landscaping things that we do, but again, those are really simple. But we also look at, with the earthquake, one of the things that we did is we helped the State Historic Preservation Office identify and document any building that was damaged. Fortunately, we didn't have a lot, but we did have some significant ones, particularly in the Liberty Wells neighborhood, some are turning out to be fairly unfortunate situations. But what we do is we help those property owners understand what kind of permits they need, what resources are available to help them out make those repairs. And then probably the most visible thing that people see in historic districts are when there's new construction. And so we help the Landmarks Commission make those decisions. We provide them with the information, analyze the design guidelines and standards. We have volumes of design guidelines that apply to historic districts. So it does take up a lot of our time, but it's also an important goal for the city.
Gotcha. What would you say would be the public's number one misconception about Salt Lake City Planning Department? Like, they think you do something that you don't do. They think you're public utilities. Like, what are the thing you have to explain over and over when you're interfacing with the public?
I think it's in the building permit process.
Okay.
It's not unusual for large cities to have their planning functions different than their zoning and implementation functions. So when they're reviewing building permits, we're not unusual in that regard. We are unusual for Utah, because in Utah, most departments would do the plan reviews for zoning and things like that. And we don't do that. And it's because of the sheer volume of work that both the planning division has and the permits office has. I think the permits office does more than 20,000 building permits per year. If you're interested in hearing about what we do, so our 1,200 applications we did last year were a couple hundred more than the city of Portland did. And Portland's about 3.5 times bigger than Salt Lake City. So part of that's a reflection of what will require people to go through, and we don't, compared to a lot of cities, we don't have as much by right development as other places.
Got it. Okay, and I thought it was also interesting how you mentioned sort of the different zonings that we see even within ELPCO, that we have commercial business, a CB, I'm sorry, it's not commercial business, it's community business, right? In 9th and 9th, moving down to residential business on some of the smaller kind of side streets. And I thought that was a very helpful slide for us to kind of get that understanding. Will you be able to share this presentation with us so that we can post it onto our Facebook page and share it?
Oh, sure. It should be an email size, but yeah, I can absolutely email it to you guys and you can do it whatever you want with it.
Great. Are there any questions from our audience for Nick about Salt Lake City planning and the presentation he gave? You can put them in the chat function, which has been very quiet this month. It was pretty active last month. Or you can just unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. This is George, right?
Yes. I know you don't do, Nick, I know you don't do zoning enforcement, but I'm kind of disappointed Salt Lake City Planning doesn't have standards for ADUs that ensure that they don't use or haven't used Airbnb, because East Bench just had an ADU approved and the landowner has been using Airbnb for several of his rooms. And they approved, the Planning Commission didn't have any choice because in our ADU ordinance, we don't have any standards that say using Airbnb is a no-no. We should though, right?
Well, we don't need to because they're not allowed in that zoning. The Airbnbs aren't allowed in the residential districts anyway. And so it doesn't matter if we had a standard that was specific to an ADU, it would be a duplicative prohibition. They're already prohibited. They're really difficult to enforce. I know that much.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, and that particular one, the applicant, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I believe they presented some evidence that they were doing rentals for more than 30 days. And that is for a rental, it has to be at least 30 days. So so that would be in compliance with our code.
But doesn't it make more sense to, I mean, we do want more, if the community wants more ADUs, wouldn't it make sense to put in some kind of note or requirement that they can't use it for Airbnb?
It's already in the code. So it's not a specific ADU regulation. It's a regulation that applies to all R1 zones.
Yeah, but if it were in the ADU code, it would be more, people wouldn't be asking for ADUs with the assumption that they can use Airbnb. I mean, I know it's illegal, but we've never been able to enforce it in Salt Lake City. Anyway,
okay.
Maybe Darren can discuss it with the council, because that's a big backlash against ADUs, and all it's going to do is stop ADUs from being allowed when people get upset enough that they're being used for Airbnb. I have 2 more questions.
Okay, can you make them quick, George?
Yes.
Thank you.
The community, it's really, really difficult to have social isolation or 6-foot spacing if you have skinny sidewalks. And I know it's a transportation issue. And I know Jonathan is working on his completer street study, but I'm a little disappointed that planning isn't pushing, not just in Sugar House, but around the city, wider sidewalks for the new development. So when somebody goes in and says, well, planning or zoning allows us to just put up a building that it can be right next to a sidewalk, that pretty much stops the sidewalk from being wider, the kind of wide we want that meet the standards for complete streets. So is there anything planning could do to put in an ordinance that requires developers to widen the sidewalk if they're putting up a building more than 1 or 2 stories?
So yeah, there are. Anytime that we're putting public access on private property, it's considered to some degree an extraction from that property. And so those are regulated by both not just state law, but federal law and court cases. And so they basically if we're going to be pulling something out of a private property that isn't already done, then we have to demonstrate that there's a central nexus, meaning that impact is that the extraction is directly related to the level of impact. It's a really difficult process to do it. The other thing that does is that it essentially widens our rights of way. And so our preference in planning is to widen the sidewalk within the existing right of way. That's problematic on state roads. It's not as problematic on city streets, but it can be in some places, and it can impact other things like street trees and public utilities. And so it's not as simple as just saying you need to put 12 feet or 15 feet or whatever space of sidewalk here, because we're extracting that. And so there has to be a broader review and discussion in city policy to do that. We're happy to do it. I think one of the interesting things that's happening right now with the current COVID pandemic that we're all dealing with is people are recognizing the need for wider sidewalks. And I would expect to make that more of a priority as a city moving forward.
Yeah, but can I point out that there are a couple of issues around the city where planning allowed buildings to go up and doorways to open out onto the sidewalk, which essentially block the sidewalk. On the other hand, recently, we've been forcing or recommending buildings that are next to the sidewalk have the doors go in so they don't block the sidewalk, which I like, but I still don't see it citywide, and especially in Sugar House, where we're trying to get wider sidewalks. It seems that these sidewalks are being taken over by the businesses. I like parklets, but not when there's a skinny sidewalk.
Gotcha.
That's something for later discussion.
Did you have one more question, George? George, did you have one more question?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. The one thing I would mention about wider sidewalks is after the 900 South reconstruction went in, we have that new bike path, that runs next to the sidewalk. And I used that today. It wasn't on my bike, but I was walking, and certainly gives you quite a lot of space. So it's nice to see that within our neighborhood being available. Gotcha. Daryl, do you have a question?
Yes, Nick mentioned zoning enforcement. What department does it?
So zoning enforcement is, their actual name is civil enforcement. They're part of building services.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. Any other questions for Nick Norris from Salt Lake City Planning?
Nick.
This is Dave, I bet, right?
Yeah. Hey, good job, Nick, taking a very complex subject and breaking it down to make it fairly understandable for everyone.
You shouldn't make it too complex. Then it would everyone think it's an easy job, right? Or too simple.
Well, I will say we want our zoning ordinance to be much more simple than it is, and hopefully you'll start seeing some changes to it that get to that, to make the things that people want easier and the things that people don't want more challenging and harder. So that's going to be our goal for the next few years, and hopefully we get a lot of support and we have further discussions about it.
Behind you belies the fact that you're working hard. Sorry.
What's interesting is I find that I'm working way more from home, getting way more done than I did in the office. Like it's been interesting how my computer's on until 9 o'clock at night almost every night, and it's better than watching TV.
Nick, we support you in that simplification of zoning. I smiled when you showed that map of 6 districts in 1927. We had that in one block face in 9th and 9th.
I know.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nick. I'm going to pull the camera back to me. Just I want to explain 2 quick things that ELPCO does with regard to the Planning Commission and Planning Department. One thing that happens is whenever there's an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, that is a non-conforming use, I think, or is sort of not, isn't an automatic approval, we get notice of that. And so we try to let the neighbors know about it. Sometimes we hold a meeting. Sometimes we just direct them to the planning resources or open houses that are available there. Bigger projects, we often do try to hold meetings on. These would be things like the East Liberty Commons project on 11th East, the Telegraph Exchange project on 800 East. We often try to either piggyback on open houses that other community councils or the planning department is holding, or we do our own event, getting community feedback, and then usually presenting sort of an official community council report to the Salt Lake City Planning Commission ahead of the decision that they make. That has to do with that whole 45-day period for review and public comment that Nick described. So just wanted to mention that the Telegraph Exchange condo project, which is a big one up on the old brick Telegraph Exchange building on 800 East, just north of 9th South, that appears to be coming up to the Planning Commission for their May 13th meeting. They meet the second Wednesday of the month usually. And so we'll be preparing our report. We just wanted to let our community members know that after several months of sort of hiatus and I think work going on behind the scenes, that project will be coming up for the Salt Lake City Planning Commission on May 13th. We'll be checking the agendas to confirm that once those come out.
Hey, Jason, real quickly, one thing I should mention is that because we can't hold in-person open houses right now, we have put on the Planning Division homepage a list of all the open house items. So each page, you can click on it, view information. For bigger projects, and when we get to like the zoning process changes and things like that, we'll probably start doing some webinars and other things at different times of the day. So we want to try to do the best we can with public engagement during this period. We also are hoping that we don't get so far down the road that people who don't have access are not left out of our processes. And so that's a big thing for us that we've been working with civic engagement and the mayor's office on, trying to find ways that we can do the best we can with that. But it's important, I think, for the community to know that there still are options. They're not as noticeable as in person, but they're still out there.
Got it. Thank you for that update. We'll try to share any new updates you guys have about webinars and more interactive approaches as opposed to just information up on a website. So we appreciate that. We find that the exchange of information when people can ask questions and get answers directly from the developer or for planning staff is the most effective way for our residents to learn about these projects and their impacts on their neighborhood. Speaking of our residents and impacts on our neighborhood, we have Myron Willson, who's an ELPCO resident, next on the agenda to talk about the Sweet Streets initiative. Myron, I'm going to pin you up here, and you have a presentation, I think, as well that you wanted to walk through.
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to load the presentation, or do you got it right there?
Are people seeing that all right?
I'm looking. I think you have to put the present button.
I did.
Let me double check here. Usually it'll double you and say. And
I hit share again, but
it might be slow sometimes. I'm looking for it.
That's why I sent it to you, just in case.
No worries. Let's see if it pops up. I don't see it here. Let me see if I can get it going.
Sorry about that.
No, this is why we are redundant. Let me sweep back here. Window. Okay.
Did that work?
I'm looking now. Oh yes, yours is up. Let me put yours together. There, yours is all good.
Okay. Essentially, working. I can't see myself, so I'll fake it here. Essentially, the initiative that we're working on is called Sweet Streets Initiative. Essentially, as you can see there, we're hoping to create a network or an initiative that recognizes that all users and folks are essential to a more equitable, sustainable society and a better community as a result. I recently retired from the Sustainability Office at the U of U, working with Taylor Anderson and Luke Garrett of Building Salt Lake, among other things, and we've started to work on this network of working to improve our streets. The background of that is that it's modeled a little bit after other local environmental and public advocacy groups like Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, Heal Utah, Friends of Great Salt Lake, etc. We realize there's already a bunch of really good work being done by individual organizations and advocacy groups such as Bike Utah or Utah Transit Riders, etc. But there's nobody kind of pulling all of these elements together to advocate for complete streets. We recognize that the expertise is there, and kind of what's missing is advocacy so that decision makers have a little more support to make the choices that they need to make in support of these initiatives. Some quick examples of some things that we're looking at right now in terms of things that we've identified that are important to be in support of would be some modal hierarchy, so that essentially something similar to what Minneapolis and other communities have done is recognize that pedestrians are first and foremost, and then kind of after that are bicycles and transit, and then the automobile would is there and supportive, but we're looking to prioritize pedestrians. And that will help create kind of equitable and sustainable transportation throughout our city and the region, supporting safety, vision zero, convenience, and reliability. We're looking to help create consistent planning documents so that zoning and the transportation master plans and bike plans and working with UTA and Wasatch Front and others, they're all consistent and identify kind of the direction and the vision that we should have, to help support city councils and other decision bodies to create budgets that actually reflect these priorities. Oftentimes people will say, or bodies will say that things are important, but don't necessarily provide budgets to make the changes that are required. But as I said originally, public advocacy is what we're really looking to help move on and improve. And we were going to have a public meeting like everybody else in March to kind of introduce ourselves and get it started. So, but that obviously was canceled, and we have been relying completely on social media to get the word out. And I believe we have nearing 100 people that have taken the survey and have expressed some interest in participating, and that's really only kind of up to 2 degrees of separation from us, our friends and friends and friends and people that we're working with. So we're hoping to get the word out to even more folks. And just lastly, how people can participate. And I noticed, thanks Jason for putting it in the meeting minutes, but essentially you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter, just search for Sweet Streets Initiative. I agree that's a little bit challenging to say, but I came from the Office of Sustainability, so I'm used to those. Take our survey. As we identify projects, we hope that folks will reach out to their elected officials and others and respond to surveys, etc., when possible. And then if you have more interest to participate, please contact us directly, either reach out through our social media and let us know that you'd like to help. So that's a very quick and dirty explanation of what we have going.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Myron, anybody have some questions for Myron about the Sweet Streets Initiative? Curious about where you got the name from. It sounds almost like a gelato company. I
can't take. I think Taylor's on the call, but I believe Luke is the one that. Vision Zero is there. We noticed several of the organizations nationally don't necessarily follow protocol for the exact name of the organization, and yeah, it's a nod to the younger folks.
Got it. I think Taylor just texted. Luke is the origin of that name, whether you like it or not. So, yeah. One thing I noticed, Myron, and I think a lot of people might be sharing this, is that I haven't filled my car up with gas in about 6 weeks. I'm doing a lot more walking and a lot more biking. And it's interesting that this initiative, this kind of focus, as we were even just talking about sidewalks, is coming along. You know, people, this is a good window, a good period for people to recognize how you can enjoy a city without your car. So,
yeah, thank you. You said it well.
Cool. Any questions for Myron? Myron lives in ELPCO, so we appreciate you kind of taking another mantle on and presenting it to our community here. We have some good infrastructure from the McClellan Trail to Liberty Park to 9th South that we can use, and I guess one of the ideas is that to share this across the entire city so that it's more connected and many populations can use it.
Yeah, we're hoping initially we're building capacity, so we're trying to stay close to home and within Salt Lake, but certainly these concepts are needed throughout the valley so that our networks are seamless and extensive throughout the region. I should say also, just as a brief aside, I was just appointed to the Transportation Advisory Board So I don't represent District 5. I'm actually a representative of HEAL Utah, but if people have feedback and such for the official channels, I'm happy to work with folks and get feedback.
That's great.
I have a comment.
Yeah, okay, we got someone with a comment. Please go ahead.
Okay, this is George. I just want to encourage your group to push for completion of the 9-line trail, and also maybe something going south on 7th East, separated from the 7th East Freeway, going south to the S-line. I'd like to see priority on that first before trying to fight people in cars. That we've been through a lot of meetings, Taylor and I know that people, when they see efforts to encourage bicycling and walking, people think it's a war on cars. And sometimes it ends up as a war on cars, and it doesn't need to be. I think we can work together on a lot of these initiatives. So I hope your group prioritizes the 9-line trail and also the a pathway for safe bicycling going south to the S-line.
Yeah, good feedback. We're still identifying some initiatives. We're the initiative to close some streets due to the pandemic. We get the word out. Really happy.
Okay, please don't say closed streets. That scares people.
To open them
I don't mind. I mean, there are a couple of streets in ELPCO that would be perfect for opening up, encouraging pedestrian and walking. 8th East, 10th East. These are great streets, but please don't say closed streets, because that is like a war on cars. Declaration of a war on cars, and we don't need that.
George, we'll just use the term liberating streets from now on.
There you go.
That always works in wartime.
Okay, I'm turning off the microphone.
Okay. Thank you, Myron, for introducing. Oh, I'm sorry, I accidentally muted you. But thank you, Myron, for talking to us. Let's kind of reconvene. We've got one more agenda item to go through, and I want to make sure we get to Tim Cosgrove because of the importance of the mayor's office in sort of kind of organizing the troops, figuring out what's going on, and letting us know what we can expect here in Salt Lake City. So, Tim, I'm going to pin you here. Are you ready to go? It looks like you're muted right now, but now you're unmuted. There you are.
Can you see me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just hit present, or?
Yeah, do you have a presentation?
I'm just going to talk about some of the questions that I was asked to prepare for, like our state and local programs for small business assistance and loans from Salt Lake City. With and I'll link you to the links and deadlines. So currently the city and the state's emergency loan program has been closed, and so far there's no confirmation for further funding. When I spoke with Roberta Reichgeld today in our economic development, they're continuously researching other grant loan opportunities for both businesses and nonprofits, and they will update that information on their social media page. I was also asked the question, can independent contractors and self-employed apply for unemployment? And the answer is yes. They are inundated. They're saying you may have to apply each week, every week. They are also eligible for the Paycheck Protection Act from the Small Business Administration program, but they need to apply for that on their own. And I'll attach that link as well. The new funding that came out today for the CARES that was passed by Congress this afternoon was about an additional $310 billion going to the Paycheck Protection Program itself. again, when I was speaking with Roberta from Economic Development, they're hoping for a better outcome for smaller, more independent businesses this time around. Nonprofits are also eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program, but I would recommend that business owners interested in applying file their taxes, their 2019 taxes, as it's easier to apply for both of those programs if they do. And then, like I said, with that updated information that we received today, our economic development is in the process of updating their website.
Gotcha. And that would be Salt Lake City Economic Development Offices is updating based on the new money that was been put into the CARES Act. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. And I heard Governor Herbert talking today about, many Utah businesses have been able to apply for those loans, a lot of them going through their own banks, which then access that money. I would just say that if anybody listening has questions, the Salt Lake City Economic Development webpage and personnel are probably a good place to go if your business is located here. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah, they're really good. They're very helpful. I know everybody's stressed out at this time. They're concerned with unemployment benefits and getting the paycheck, the coronavirus stimulus check. And I can send links on that as well. It's a precarious time for all of us, and businesses that have worked hard and independent contractors, self-employed, that have worked hard to create these businesses, they're all in a state of flux and hurting and not knowing what to expect. And we're trying to do our best to connect them with those resources and get them up and going and ensure that there's some kind of safety that we can provide for them, or at least connect them with if it's available.
Got it. Thanks, Tim. Are there other questions that you've got there for us or answers?
Yes. Let's see. Also wanted to speak about I had an update from Lynn Jacobs, where the 500 East resurfacing project between 9 South and 1300 South. Lynn Jacobs is the transportation engineer, the manager over that project, and they're currently conducting a survey. So far, they've already received 122 responses, but that street surface survey is available now. If anybody from ELPCO would like to fill it out and share their insights and expertise and experience, and I'll send that link. There's also, in addition, transportation is working on ways to improve the bus stops along 500 East from 300 South to just south of I-80. They're currently working on the details for each stop with the primary purpose to make them more accessible to all riders and improve bus times, performance, shelters, benches, trash cans, bike racks, lighting at the various bus stop routes. So that's something exciting at the local level that people may want to participate on.
Gotcha. Just on the other side of Liberty Park from ELPCO. Yep.
Yes. Yep. It's on the west side there. Were there any questions on that?
Thanks for posting those links in the chat function, Tim. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And then Earth Day was yesterday, but and I'll send a link with Department of Sustainability and what they've been working on. But our very own beloved mayor is working on an Arbor Day tree planting event tomorrow April 24th, Friday, at 10 a.m. over at the Rosewood Park, just east of Guadalupe Bay School on 1200 West. And this is originally intended to be her huge kickoff on the 1,000 Tree Initiative, but for obvious reasons, we had to scale that back. It will be shown on the SLC TV, and I think that's just part of the mayor's initiative and efforts to continue the platform for clean air and what the city's doing to avoid the inversions that we previously were getting and continue the good clean air that we can build with our city and our community and everything that everybody else is doing, and just grow more trees.
Well, we'll be watching to make sure that they're planted 6 feet apart as well, Tim. Okay.
Okay. And what was the last thing? Oh yeah, I have, so our community outreach department, we recently created a newsletter called Community Update. It's to help close the digital divide with some of the transitions that we've all been working through. It's got information and links and updates. So if you're interested in receiving our community newsletter, I help write. Haley Leak is the chair of this, but she does an awesome job. And if you're interested in receiving our community newsletter and our update, you can contact me or send me an email, and I can make sure that you're on that mailing list.
Is there a place that people can sign up online like they can for the council district newsletters?
Not yet. We don't have our own page.
Okay. You know, what we'll do in the meantime is share it on ELPCO. We'll make a PDF and share it. But it is a great resource. So we really appreciate the city doing that. It's basically a newsletter with all of the links and information about what's going on at the city. But then also some news that you can use, within your community, within your family, within your home. Very helpful stuff. So if you don't get it and you have appetite for another newsletter, I highly recommend it, because I think, Tim, you and your department do a great job on it.
Oh, thank you, Jason. We want to serve as a resource. We want to be helpful and connective, and I may not always have the answer at the top of my head, but I know who to go to, and I want to be responsive and responsible, and just love our community, love everything that you do at ELPCO, that Daryl does, and any way we can help, we're happy to.
Great. Any other questions for Tim? Well, we've got him here. Tim has placed a bunch of the links that he's talked about in the chat section here, so feel free to copy those down. If you see them, we'll put these up on the Facebook page along with the eventual edited version of this video as well. Tim, I just wanted to say, as I mentioned to you before, that I really appreciate the mayor's sort of daily videos and tweets and just really connecting personally with the members of Salt Lake City, the residents here, and of ELPCO. It's just nice to see that. I think we miss seeing a lot of people in person, and so what we can get on a screen sometimes helps a little bit. So I'd say keep that up. It's quite helpful for our residents. So
thank you, Jason. I'll be sure to let her know.
And we are at the end of our agenda, except for ELPCO updates, from board members. And so I wanted to check in with Daryl, co-chair of ELPCO, to see if he had any updates and information that he wanted to share. I had a couple of ideas as well. Daryl and I, we talked a little bit about them, but what do you think we could end the meeting with here?
Jason and I talked today, and he expressed concern about when everyone starts going back to work, what happens. Kids are out of school. I think it's a great opportunity for the community to engage with one another and say this is a new time and requires some unusual strategies of working together.
That's right. I mean, because schools are pretty much closed for the rest of the year, but if people start returning to work more regularly starting in May, and summer camps aren't yet in operation, who knows if they will be, there's definitely a bit of a gap here that I think many in our community are going to have to face. You know, maybe one member or a family could stay home with kids, but I think that's something that we're going to be exploring over the next couple of weeks as we head towards more people returning to work, even in a limited fashion, because there probably are going to be some other challenges that show up as well. Are there any issues that members of the community have come up with you hear on the meeting that you guys want us to address or take a look at, or any speakers that you think we should bring in specifically dealing with COVID-19, or do you just want us to talk about planning issues instead of COVID-19? Is that a better thing to talk about here at ELPCO? Anybody have some ideas or feedback? I'm not seeing any. Let's see here. There was anything on the chats? Nope. One idea that I had was maybe bringing in Andy Larson. He is actually traditionally the jazz reporter, sports reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune. But he's been writing some pretty compelling and interesting articles for the Tribune about COVID-19. You can tell he's a stats person, a data person, is the way he approaches this. So I thought maybe asking him if he wanted either do a video that we could broadcast on ELPCO on our Facebook page, or have him attend our next meeting in May to give sort of a feedback on the role of the Salt Lake Tribune in reporting on the pandemic, as well as what he is seeing and maybe isn't even writing about yet, but is still thinking about, to kind of give us a bit of a head of the curve approach. Do people find that interesting? Would you like to hear from media folks, experts in public health? Is this something that you think ELPCO should move into? Wish there was like a thumbs up that people could give. That way we could just talk. All right, we have one person chatting. Thank you for saying that that's something you like to hear. I'm just curious about it because, and Landon said he'd be interesting too. Landon, you brought in Taylor Stevens from the Salt Lake Tribune to talk about the inland port, which, wow, that seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? And she was definitely very helpful at explaining a complex issue. So maybe getting some of these more issue experts, reporters, folks from the university, folks in our community who are experts on these to come and give some talks. And if it's something that's too long for a meeting, what we thought about doing was maybe just doing a video chat, editing it, and then just throwing it up on our Facebook page or in our e-newsletter so that people could watch it that way. Because video is certainly the medium of the day for getting stuff out. Okay, looks like people are interested in that. Thanks for writing back. Tim, you also wrote about small-scale antennas. Someone wrote about that. Yes, okay. Yeah, that's a big issue. There was actually a sit-in protest, or someone handcuffed themselves to a 5G cell phone antenna in East Central Community Council earlier this week to try to prevent it from going in. There's going to be a lot of 5G antennas that are happening. I think that's definitely something ELPCO is going to take a look at. Some people are concerned about the public health benefit or sort of negative side of that. Other people are concerned about the aesthetics. Some people are actually maybe glad to actually get better cell phone reception where they live, if they live in a dead zone. So there's a lot of different voices on that. So Tim, thanks for bringing that up. I think we will bring that forward. Certainly District 4 has been experiencing a lot of 5G antenna issues, and so I imagine I'll move down to District 5 soon as well. Cool. Any other issues people want to write in or chat in that you think we should address coming up? We have a couple more development stories that we'll be following and presenting on, specifically around 9th and 9th, different projects that are coming to fruition or people want to present to us about. But, you know, it's kind of hard to ignore the topic of the year, which is sort of the new lives we find ourselves living and the new restrictions and limitations. So probably want to jump into that as well. So we'll explore it. Let's see here. One other thing I wanted to mention is the 9th and 9th Street Festival, something that we look forward to every September. It's usually the second Saturday of September. Right now, we don't know what's going to happen with that. I was talking with Jen Bloom a couple of days ago. We're kind of in a wait and see. A lot depends on both city and county health orders, as well as what's going on with the sort of infection rate and transmission rate. We're lucky that it's later in the year, unlike some of the summer festivals, so we do have a little bit more time to see what happens. But we just don't know yet. We're going ahead with the planning and getting vendors and things like that, getting that going. And we'll stay in touch and let you know. It's a beautiful event. We love it. Even if we can maybe adapt it somehow, we might try to do that to see if we can keep sort of some semblance of our community event, but keeping in mind the important public health restrictions that we need to follow. So more on that in the future. We've got a couple of months until we really have to make a decision, yes or no. And if you have any ideas or feedback on how we might be able to do a revised 9th and 9th Street Festival, please let us know. Any other issues? Anybody else want to bring stuff up? Kind of our new business side of the agenda? And you can definitely tell me I need to do better than just throwing bed sheets over my bookshelves in terms of my background. I got to work on that. So we're all in a constant state of improvement, and these ELPCO meetings will hopefully get a little bit better as we learn new tricks. So Daryl, I think we're ready to adjourn. Are you feeling that too?
I'm doing great. And one thing Jason and I talked about a couple times now is if you haven't taken a look at the Salt Lake County Health Department's dashboard for the COVID virus, I believe they update it, Tim, correct me, at 2 p.m. every day with current numbers. It shows a lot of data. It's very interesting to look at zip code infections. West of us is not the best place in Salt Lake City to live. We're in what I would call a middle range, and other parts of the south end of the valley is definitely in better shape than we are here. So we're going to try and, Jason said he would publish that on our next ELPCO newsletter.
Yep, we did improve a link in the newsletter. It was in sort of a list of resources. We do like taking a look at data, knowing what's going on, especially in our zip code and sort of how it affects the rest of the city. Tim, thanks for throwing it up there. Tim just threw it up in the chat function of the meeting. We're in a situation governed by numbers, and so we're tracking that as best we can. And we understand that Salt Lake City, as a place that population could potentially double every day because of the number of workers coming into it, faces some significant challenges in terms of transmissions and density. So I think, at least here at ELPCO, we support what Mayor Mendenhall and others have been doing to try to not move too quickly in terms of opening things up because of the special situation we have in Salt Lake because of our offices, workers, and density. So thanks for that, Daryl. Numbers are good. It's a great way to teach your kids statistics too, if you're doing a little bit of homeschooling, logarithmic curves, right? Never too early to learn about those.
And one of the things I liked on that website is they featured in the middle of the presentation things to be aware of indicators that you might be infected.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe a good reason to have Andy Larson come and speak to us if we can get him. He's a stats person who has been following this very closely for the Salt Lake Tribune. Well, we hope to have Andy or someone else at the May 28th meeting, which will be our next one. In the meantime, we will stay in touch via our e-newsletters, which come out twice a month on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month. If you don't get those, there's links in the chat and also on our Facebook page about to sign up. And we will continue our monthly meetings as best we can, hopefully with a better backdrop next time. And we'll do, Dave's helping stack up the virtual chairs in the virtual closet. Thank you, Dave. Don't hurt your back doing that, okay? We appreciate your time, you guys here, and we'll stay in touch. And reach out to us at elpcoslc@gmail.com with any suggestions or requests for help. That's something else we do as well. So until May 28th, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.